Hello and welcome. Welcome to this edition of Afterthoughts. My name is Bianca Taal. I'm one of the programmers of IFFR, and I'm looking forward very much to a conversation with filmmaker Ashish Avikunthak, who has joined us here today to talk about his film, A Glossary of Non-Human Love. Welcome, Ashish, and thank you for having your film with us at IFFR.
Thank you for having me at IFFR. This is a privilege and an honor. And thank you very much for taking time out to talk to me. Really excited to have this conversation.
Thank you. First off, I wanted to ask, well, the film deals very much with an alternate world in which we look at a very human concept of love in a world that's dominated by technology, which is a notion that resonates with me very much, and especially actually during this time of pandemic, where so much of our interactions are via technology, just as we're talking right now. So I was wondering if you could talk a bit about how do you see the role of technology in our lives?
Oh, I think, I'm a filmmaker, so technology is intrinsic to my way of being. It's like almost part of my ontology. It is technology, the choice to work on cinema rather than, let's say, painting or writing is a choice which basically means that one has to engage with technology. And I have been making films for nearly 25 years. So I started engaging with cinema when it was still celluloid, and especially in a country like India, where it was very, very expensive to make films which did not have commercial viability. And so for me, technology is fundamental to the way I am and the only means through which I express. However, in the last 25 years, technology has become slowly started penetrating our beings in a way that is very comforting and also very discomforting, right? In the sense that from computers to cell phones to you just name it, everything is. The very fact that I'm having this conversation, as you just mentioned, is through a very complex technological innovation. And it's really a boon for us that in this time of pandemic, I'm talking to you from Calcutta right now, which is in the midst of a lockdown. India, as you know very well, is going through the worst pandemic experience in the history of COVID-19 pandemic. This is the worst ever. Yesterday's New York Times, for instance, mentioned that the government of India is so grossly underreporting the numbers of people dead that they are estimating nearly 1.5 million to 2 million people dead. And so it's just extraordinary times we are living in. In this context, technology is the only ways through which we can, and through Zoom. I mean, I teach on Zoom, and just a few minutes ago, my nephew had his 13th birthday, and there were about 10 of us in different parts of India wishing him on Zoom. So it is ubiquitous.
Actually, you're talking about choosing film as a medium to express your art also leads me to a next question, because compared to other art forms, making cinema is also it's not a solitary art form. A painting one can do by oneself, but making a film is also a collaborative effort. Is that also something that collaborative working that is important in your way of working?
Absolutely. So one of the things is that for me, before I started making films, I worked as a political activist. Mm-hmm. And when you work as a political activist, you recognize the importance of collaboration, of comradeship, of friendship, of working together. And so when I started, one of the things that attracted me about cinema was this possibility of collaboration. However, something that I realized very early on, and that has been one of the key elements of my practice, is that I did not want my cinema to become industrial. in the sense that I did not want to make films where there are hundreds of people working together, where it's in a world of hierarchies. And so I was very wary of that kind of filmmaking. So the filmmaking practice that I started with is something that I still work with. I work with a very small crew. Very few people work, and especially with the rise of digital technology, it is now possible to just work with a cameraman and a sound recordist and 2 actors or 3 actors, and you can make a whole film, which is what this film was, which is the way we shot this film, in the sense that at no given time there were about 8 or 9 of us, more than 7, 8 or 9 of us working together. And these are collaborators, these are friends. Most of the people who work with me don't work with me because I can give them money, because this kind of film, as if you've seen, is not a commercial film in any sense. It's a deeply philosophical and almost a theoretical film. And people who have worked with me, and this is not the first time, I'm like, my body of work is kind of driven by such theoretical and philosophical issues. And most of the people who have worked with me because they believe not so much in me, but believe in this kind of cinema. And so it's a very deeply collaborative exercise, the kind of films I make. And this is a choice. The choice is, to kind of put it theoretically, is that I am not an industrial filmmaker, but I'm definitely an artisanal filmmaker, an artist filmmaker, which works with a small group of friends and collaborator in what you would call a studio setting.
Thanks. And back to the glossary, or the dictionary, or the manual, I meant to say, that you present us with. It consists of 64 chapters, 64 words. How did you come to these 64?
Oh. So the only way I can answer this question is the way I made this film. So this film took nearly 6 years to make. When I started making the film, there was no glossary in the picture. There were no words in the picture. As I said earlier, I worked with collaborators. So we were working on another film. I said, let's continue working. And so the way I did is that we wrote, I and my collaborator, we wrote a series of dialogues. And with a group of actors, we started shooting. The film has been shot in Calcutta, in a small town called Chandannagar. Chandannagar is very famous in India as one of the French colonies in India. And so that's like just about 150 kilometers from Calcutta. So we shot there. It is one of the few places in and around Calcutta which still has old colonial buildings in which we shot the film. And then part of the film was shot in Bombay. So the idea was to take these actors, the crew, and bunch of dialogues. We shot in these locations for a course of 2 years. I live a bi-national life. I spend 6 months of my time teaching in a university in America and 6 months in India. So, and this is like I keep on going back and forth every 3 or 4 months. I'm going back and forth. And so this film was shot episodically. It was not shot at one go. It was while we were editing the film that I realized that I had to. So I shot we shot for about, I think, 30 days, 30 shooting days over the course of nearly about 2 years. And I think I must have shot about 15 or 20 hours of footage. And we said, okay, I decided that we should stop and we should start editing. So I got, this was the stage when I got involved with my editor. And we started editing, and then there was a lot of, what should I say, problems. I was not very happy with the way the film was moving, in the way we were trying to edit. It is then that the idea of the glossary struck. So it's kind of a post-production idea rather than. So in the sense, it is the edit that gave birth to the idea that a new form has to emerge. And that's how I picked up the 64 words. I was very interested in I've always been very interested in the idea of love, like all of us. And so that's how I started picking up these words. So the words that you see in these films have been in the film has been picked up mostly from Indian traditional history and philosophy. Some of these words have a very important, definite definition in the history of Indian philosophy. So what I'm trying to do in this film is to kind of destabilize those definitions also. And that's how we, once I got the idea that this could be a glossary, I edited the film in 3 months. We just picked up the words, and one after another I started going. And that's when the idea of even the idea of non-human emerged. The non-human idea is again a very philosophical idea, in the sense that it is a non-human can be any object. It can be an algorithm, the very algorithm that Facebook uses, Twitter uses. That's a very powerful algorithm, artificial intelligence algorithm that Google talks about. Is the moment you type in Google, is some non-human algorithm that decides what you see. To something that is very common in almost all ancient world, the ideas of spirits, the idea of God, the idea of ghost. So we have a whole spectrum of non-human within the philosophical discourse, both in Western philosophical discourse and in the non-Western world. So I'm very interested in what I'm trying to do in this film is to invoke this idea of non-human in its most abstract form, which therefore I use the word artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence can be an algorithm like the one Google uses. It can also be God. And so it has that kind of spectrum. So it is now up to the audience to read it and to interpret it the way they want. For me, I am invoking a whole spectrum of non-humans and thinking about that in this film.
Yeah, because indeed, because I wanted to ask you indeed as well about the role of religion and the divine within the film. Yeah.
So, my larger body of work, this is my seventh feature film. My larger body of work is very deeply located in Indian philosophy and Indian religiosity. And that's something, a very important political, artistic move on my part. Because in the last 25, 30 years, as you would know, India has moved from a seemingly secular polity to a highly religious, almost fascist polity that we see now. And in this polity, religion, Hinduism, I believe, has been hijacked by the fascist forces in India, the fundamentalist and the authoritarian forces. In the process, Hinduism has shifted. It has become a very narrow ideological way of thinking for most people. So what I want to do in my larger body of work is to kind of take out Hinduism and try to think of it in its deepest philosophical way. Therefore, in almost all my films, divine figures like Kali, Ganesh, Shiva, all these figures are populated. And I do that because I'm very deliberately interested in having the conversation with these divine figures within my historical, political, philosophical genealogy. In the same way, for instance, the European philosophers can interact with Kant and with Hegel, and there is a genealogy. What I'm trying to do is to open up that genealogical conversation, which I think is very important, because with the rise of authoritarian fundamentalist reading of Hinduism, that it is very important for somebody like me as an artist, I believe, that this voice needs to be also foregrounded. So in a certain sense, you're right. The non-human element in this film can be thought of as Indian religious figures. But again, as I said, it's a spectrum. And it is up to the audience to decide, to interpret and read it which spectrum of non-human they are affected by. And that is what I'm trying to do in this film.
Thank you. And something else which really struck me in the film is the exploration of the body, male and female bodies, and its beauty in the film. Can you also talk a bit about that?
Absolutely. So there is a very long history in India of the depiction of the body, and especially the nude body, which I use in this film very consciously. Again, something that I've not used, I have used in my earlier films. So my inspiration, or let's say what I am, rather than inspiration, I would say what I'm trying to invoke in this, in the depiction of the body in these films is the idea of what we in Indian thought would call the sacred body. And the sacred body in India is often the nude body. So you have the body, which is the nude body in India, is not the sexual body. I mean by India, I'm talking about ancient Indian iconographic tradition. The nude body is not the sexual body. It is not the erotic body. It is the pure body. It is the sacred body, which is not attached. The nudity is reflects about detachment to materiality. So, and this is something not associated with Hinduism. You have the nude body in Buddhist iconography, and very importantly in Jain religion, you have the nude body is considered to be the most divine and sacred body. And obviously in the Hindu tradition, the iconographic tradition, the nude body is the exemplary sacred body. That is what I'm trying to invoke in this film. And so that is one spectrum of the body. The other element in Indian iconographic tradition is the nude body is also the daily body, the banal body, that it is not. So I think what I'm trying to say, or I'm trying to suggest, that the nude body in my film is anti-sexual. It is sacred, it is banal, but it is not erotic or sensual in any sense. And that is something I am underscoring in this film, which is something I do it in my earlier films also. So that is where to say is the theoretical genealogy of the representation of the nude body in my film.
Thank you. Thank you. I see that we're already getting close to the end of the conversation. It goes very fast, but I'd love to ask you another question. You talked already a little bit about what part of the film or how you were kind of building part of the film during the editing. And yeah, I was really curious to talk a bit more about the total composition of the film, because the scenes give us such different tones and textures, locations, and some scenes are more text driven, others have a lot of movement. I think of the wonderful scene of the playing tennis, for example. So there's a whole constellation of different natures of the scenes in themselves. And I was wondering how you came to that composition, how much of it was structured in your mind before going into shooting, how much of it was taking place in the editing.
So one of the key elements of this film is that it has been shot on location. We did not work in any studio. The second thing, and which is something which creates the texture, is that this film has been shot without any tungsten light. So there is no lights being used in the film. We worked only with available lights. So I worked with my DOP, with whom I've been working for the past 15 years. And over the years, we have worked and devised strategies to work with sun, with available lights. And we've shot on 16 millimeter with available light. And this is a practice that we have developed. So often we go to a location, we study the way the light moves, and that's when we decide to compose. However, I have to also tell you a lot of this composition is improvised. A lot of this composition is very instantaneous, spontaneous. You go to the space and then let the space impact you. And not just me as a director, but also the DOP, the actors. So there's a lot of interaction that we allow for the space to work in my films. The other thing that is very, very important in the film is the color correction that we did. So this was shot on a Canon 1DC camera, which had one of the earliest 4K DSLR that came out about 7 or 8 years ago. And we spent, I and my DOP and the color grader, we spent about 3 months coloring this film. And so that was also a very important element of the texturization of the film. So if you see the film closely, you will see every word has a different texture. And that was something very carefully done with my colorist, who's also trained as a DOP. And so there's a lot of thought. There was a lot of thought that went in the coloring of the film. And then it took, while we were coloring, it took nearly about 1.5 years to do the sound design of the film. So the sound design is also took a long time. I usually take a long time working, so it's a very slow process. Also, this is one of the reasons it's a slow process, that I'm working with 2 or 3 films simultaneously. So this is a film that took 6 years, because at the same time I was shooting other films and working on other films, because I think it is very important for me to let the images and the cinema to also impact me. And the collaborators. So it's kind of the cinema then becomes almost like a non-human in a certain sense, right? Which also impacts us. And that's the practice of this. That's the practice I have been following for the last few years, is that the film itself becomes an entity that, and so you have to give it a time, rather than, you shoot in 20 days, edit in 20 days, you're done and done. Out here, you let the film also impact you, impact us, and then we go back and forth. So in the process, the film also becomes a collaborator in the practice. Wow. And that's how this film emerged.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And at the same time, I'm also very glad to hear you're working on different films at the same time. So that taking the time with a film doesn't necessarily mean we'll have to wait for 10 years for a next film.
No, you will escape from me pretty soon.
It's wonderful. Unfortunately, our time has run out for the conversation, but I want to thank you again so much for joining us for this Afterthoughts, and for generously sharing.
And I want to thank you for taking your precious time to look at the film carefully and ask me these very, very important questions. So thank you. I really appreciate the time you took in engaging with my film.
And thank you. And also to the audience watching, thank you for joining the festival, for watching the film, and for watching this interview.